Hi, it's Heidi Sawyer. I had an amazing opportunity to spend some evening sessions with a group of extremely motivated, intuitive, sensitive people. These are people who are driven to understand the deeper meaning and purpose of their life. During these sessions, I took them along a 7-step proven path that I have walked myself and helped many others do the same. That I've done with incredible results. I'm sorry you couldn't be there, but I hope this is the next best thing. These are excerpts from the live events. Here they are. Enjoy, and I hope more importantly that you do something with them for your life moving forward. Thank you for listening. So, healing the transition from personality to soul. So to begin with, looking at what is the personality and what is the soul, the easiest way to really explain that really quite quickly is through this analogy in terms of how you look at stuff. So the personality hoarding and the sofa on the street. Okay, the personality likes to keep stuff. The soul likes to give it up. It becomes an internal argument that goes on a consistent basis and probably a daily basis. How you clean your cupboards out will be reflective of how your personality likes to keep stuff. If you're someone who empties them, looks at everything, and puts 3/4 of it back, even though you've not looked in that cupboard for a year, then you know that it likes to take its time over it. Okay? If you're someone who opens the cupboards and thinks, well, I haven't looked in here in 6 months, I don't know what's in here, whatever it is, doesn't matter, scoops it out, puts it in a bin bag and forgets about it, then your way of doing things is going to be at a different pace. Okay, does that make sense? For most of you, even if you tried that, you put it all in a bin bag, you'd have to keep going back to the bin bag to double check that you haven't thrown anything important away, just in case. So, the relationship, this is the easiest way of describing it. So the relationship between the personality, so the personality is the everyday self, okay? So it's the everyday self. You may want to label it as the ego, but generally I would label it as the part of you that has your it has its self-preservation as its thing of primary importance. And the reason is because it does have a function. Okay, the personality does have a function because it's meant to look after this physical thing that we wander around in. Okay, so the relationship between the personality and the soul it's the infinite self, it's the true self, it's the authentic self. Okay, the experience of. So the relationship between the two, as I describe it, as it's the same as buying a sofa. Okay, so you might decide that you need a new one. Okay, so that decision may have been something that is over quite a distinct period of time. You keep looking at something and think, no, I want to change it, I don't like it, I need a new one. It doesn't happen overnight. Okay, but there will be, or there is, when it comes to it, for most people, there is a reluctance to get rid of the old one. Okay, so once you've just made a decision to change it, there's a reluctance to remove what is old. The reasons, it might be old, but it's what you know. Okay? It has memories attached to it. Sofas, for some reason or other, have strong memories for people attached to it. There's a sentimental thing about sofas. There may also be, kind of cost or the inconvenience of changing things. They're all things to consider before you would then go and buy a new one. Okay, agreed? An actual sofa doesn't have any consciousness. okay? Obviously, maybe it gathers energy, as sofas do, because it's had people as part of it, but generally, it doesn't have a consciousness of its own, okay? It doesn't have a voice of its own, but if you look at it in terms of the personality as a sofa, it has one, okay? What will generally happen is that it won't agree to the new sofa. Okay, does that make sense? You start to feel, as I start to give you kind of a reference point as far as this is concerned, you may well find that there are reactions in the solar plexus here. Okay, it doesn't agree to the new sofa. Yeah. So what it does is it tries to keep the old one. Okay, so the personality wants to keep the old sofa. And part of that is that it will argue that it can put it into another room, okay? So anyone who's bought a new sofa recently, this is exactly what you've been doing, okay? It can stay because for some reason or other, you've got a strong attachment to it. It can stay because really, it's not that bad, okay? Thought you might like that. So what happens, we end up in our life sofa stacking, okay? So what that means, the new one arrives, okay, so, oh, seem to upset that as well. The new one arrives. What we're doing in the internal world is asking the delivery people to stack the new one on top of the old one. Okay? Internally, we may actually have quite a few stacked until, metaphorically, we need a stepladder to watch the telly. Because you wouldn't buy a new sofa and stack it on top of the old one. When other people come into your house and they go, oh, do you want to have a seat? But we do it in the internal world, okay? The issue is, or it's not really an issue, it's a positive. When you're in a house, the inner self has too many old sofas. Okay, it's got too many things stacked up. So when we stack them in the internal world, the soul's energy becomes too strong to be denied. So the personality is attached to the sofas. Okay? After a while, the soul energy is too strong to be denied. It wants the old ones out. Okay? And you may not like the fact that it wants the old ones out. So as far as the soul is concerned, what does it want to do? It literally wants to turf out the old sofas into the street. Okay? Whether you like it or not. Which is why you go through different cycles that feel very uncomfortable. And the reason is because you got too many sofas stacked. Okay? You've been trying to hang on to certain things for too long, so the soul has got fed up with you and said, we haven't got room for all these sofas. They're going to have to go. But the thing is, it doesn't say, oh, well, you've got to choose on one going. When it's decided, the whole lot goes. Okay, does that make sense? This is the time when you feel like you're going through cycles that are desperately uncomfortable. Who's been through some of those? So when the soul is throwing out sofas, okay, initially it stirs a feeling of vulnerability because you have no choice but to release something that you've been attached to, even if it's unhealthy. Okay? So, as far as that's concerned, the release of the personality dominance, because it's the personality that becomes dominant, because it thinks that it's taking care of this. Okay? What it actually means is when you're releasing the personality dominance, it means that you are releasing the appeasing of others. Okay? So if you've been through cycles at the moment where you felt that you've got a little bit too happy with your mouth, and others have got a little bit unhappy with that, because normally you've been really quite compliant and done as you're told, all of those kind of things, then you know that the personality dominance is fading. Okay? Because it's starting to become impossible for you to emotionally compromise. Does that make sense? So, when it comes to that stage where you feel like you no longer can comfortably focus on appeasing others, that is when you know you're starting to close the gap between the personality and the soul. Okay, does that make sense? So who's found that they've got a little bit got into trouble in recent times? Okay, so it's a good thing. But the issue is, for what happens is you get very good at putting up with, and then you wait until the sofa stacking gets so bad that it all comes out, rather than just, kind of moving them out when they were supposed to go in the first place. Okay? And then when it goes, you're then filled with paralyzing guilt. Okay? So the point to you becoming more conscious, it's to increase this internal conversation, okay, between personality and soul, because you're not going to get rid of one or the other. Your purpose is not to get rid of the personality, because if you get rid of that, you don't have a physicality. Okay, does that make sense? It's about harmonizing the two. Okay. So how do you harmonize the two? It's about recognizing when we're doing something from fear. Okay? Some of that is obvious, but sometimes what gets in the way is that we're confusing happiness, which has been motivated by fear. Okay? Does that make sense? So moving away from something rather than to. Okay? So quite often we get fixated on something that we think is going to bring happiness, and then find it doesn't bring happiness, because in actual fact the original motivation was fear. So it was personality based, it wasn't soul based. Because the soul path isn't always the comfortable one, even though it's the one that turns out best for you in the long run. Okay, does that make sense? Which is the internal row about when the sofa goes. Okay? So the personality is the I, okay? What it does is it will view itself as the victim. Okay, you can't help it, because it will view itself strongly as the victim. And it will go as far as saying, if there is a God, why me? Why do I get singled out? Why has this happened to me? Okay, so the way that I'm using this to kind of symbolize is, as far as the the Kabbalah is concerned. Okay, so those of you who know me obviously know that I use the tree of life as a fantastic way of symbolizing how certain things operate. Those of you who don't, that's what I use. Okay. So the Kabbalah teachings are things that are they are thousands of years old. Okay, there's different versions of it that have been morphed into different ways of looking at things, but generally the message of it is it's the secret to how everything works. Okay, so again, using the tree of life, there's a massive amount of information in it about how everything generally works, but also how you work and how this framework works within your own system. Okay, but the teachings of it say that the whole point of life is about the combining of the personality. So the personality is then determined as man, with the soul, which is God in inverted commas. Okay, does that make sense? So the personality and the soul exists as an external-ish as well as the internal. Okay, does that make sense? It isn't in an element of separation. So through the consciousness line, which is straight down the center of the tree of life, you've got at the top there the 110 as the whole self. You've got underneath it that's Darth. Obviously it's symbolized as Darth Vader, which is the challenge component. The things that pop up in life that are very difficult to predict. Okay, they are always things that catch us unawares. But what they really are times when the soul is throwing out sofas. Okay, does that make sense? So it will throw the whole lot out, whether you like it or not, turn it on its head, and turn it into something that you can't control. It does it to push you forward. It doesn't do it to hold you up. Okay? The soul vibration, which is the 6, which is in the middle there, is start of the connection between the unseen world and the seen world, because the next one down is the 9 of the subconscious, and then we go down into the 110 of the body. So the 110 in the body self and the 110 at the top there are two parts of the same thing. So 110 at the bottom is the personality, 110 at the top is the soul in its purest form. Okay, does that kind of make sense? Now, this is the bit that you're going to get slightly uncomfortable with. So, again, in terms of the Kabbalistic teachings, and again, this is a way of showing you something, take what resonates, put to one side what doesn't. Tied into that, it is the belief system within that is what we do in the physical world impacts God, so to speak, rather than God is the all-powerful, all-knowing being. Does that make sense? So what we do in the personality affects what we do in the soul. Does that make sense? It's not always the other way round. Okay? So what we do in our life is we project onto the soul that somehow it is completely responsible for our well-being, rather than taking any responsibility in the personality. Does that make sense? The moment we start to take responsibility in the personality and start to feel properly is the moment that the transformation happens. And I promise you, it will happen like that. Okay? So, within the Kabbalistic foundations, it's not the other way round. It's not that there is this great hand telling us how we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to do. We have influence the other way round. Okay? So within that framework, how it works is that the human misdeeds that create an imbalance, it's that upsets the harmony between the two worlds of the physical and the non-physical. Okay, does that make sense? So if you need or want to transform something in your physical world, in your personality, the only way it will transform is if you take full responsibility for it. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Because the moment of transformation comes at the exact moment that you take the full responsibility for it. Because magically, everything else goes blah, 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 blah. And it doesn't mean that you take it as the victim. Okay, does that make sense? There's a big difference as far as that's concerned. You don't then lament over going, oh my God, all my sofas are being thrown out. You go, yeah, it was coming. It's saying, okay, I let them stack up. Does that make sense? That's the whole reason, or the whole thing of letting go. That's what letting go actually is. Okay? So, in other words, no one is coming to save us. Okay? The responsibility is already there within the personality. When we take responsibility fully within the personality, everything else then works with us. Okay? And part of the responsibility in the personality is in that 9 vibration of the subconscious in terms of it tidying it up. Now, some of those things you've already definitely made a decision on to tidy that, because you already have a strong knowledge of the soul. Okay? But what I'm saying is where you're getting stuck is where you're not having the full responsibility in the personality. Okay? Does that make sense? It will be, to a certain degree, in denial. So, how do you know when the subconscious is tidying up? Well, you know because you start dreaming of stuff. Okay. You start dreaming of stuff, things start tidying up in your sleep. Okay? Things that you thought, whoa, that's all a bit weird. Some crazy symbolism going on there. That's where it's tidying up. Okay? As you go further into your own path, you know that tidies up a lot. Some of you will be very busy in the sleep state. I will actually have on my gravestone, she liked to sleep. So the literal interpretation of the foundation of the Kabbalah is, and I'm just putting this in here so that you can kind of get a feel for it. So the literal interpretation is, in the beginning, it created God. Does that make sense? It wasn't God created. In the beginning, it created God. That's the literal interpretation of how this energy works. So within that interpretation, it's not God that created, it's infinity created God. Does that make sense? So it's an extension of our consciousness. But infinity is what we came from. Hopefully some of that sort of, it's a bit kind of, oh, okay, that's a bit complicated. Yes. Infinity and beyond. So what is the main issue? What is the issue? The issue is an unmanaged personality. Okay? Now, we all know a lot of unmanaged personalities. Okay? We all know plenty of people who kind of throw their toys out the pram and show an unmanaged personality in many different ways. Everyone in this room, your personality is a lot more managed than 99% of the population. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah? But how it shows generally in how we operate, there is a competitiveness of the personality. So it's always looking for where it does and it doesn't fit in. It's always looking for, should I be here, shouldn't I be here, or what can I do, what is going to make this better, okay, rather than just being there, okay. The fights. There is a daily fight that happens with your personality. The rebellions of the personality, and you do it on a consistent basis, which is, should I do this? Should I not do this? We all know that when there is an important deadline, the house gets cleaned. We all know that when we're supposed to be doing something, oh, there is something so interesting on the TV. It is kind of, well, it's two energies. It's kind of a preparation, and it's kind of a preparation for feeling, but it's also a obvious scenario, which is it's a procrastination. Okay, and it's one of those fights that we have with the personality about throwing a sofa out. The rebellion happens when we haven't spoken, yet when someone tells us what to do, we like to do the exact opposite. So getting us as intuitive sensitives to do anything, it is like herding cats. We are the Siamese cats, so we do tend to do as we please, and we tend to go in different directions. And if others try and herd us in one direction, do they get to hear about it? Because our big driving force internally is freedom. Okay, does that make sense? But that big driving force internally, as far as freedom is concerned, some of it is a rebellion, and some of it is actually recognizing the soul's frequency. Okay? Because the soul frequency isn't tied down, it's movable. The personality likes rules. Okay? There is also this battle of the personality that wants, or it has a strong desire for a guarantee of a particular outcome before it will participate. I hear this every single day. Which is, well, honey, if you're saying that I should be doing that, well, what's the exact outcome of that? And if I say, well, I know, I go, well, I'm not sure I want to do it. I said, well, believe me, that's what the deeper part of you wants to do. You can resist it for however long you want to, but it'll come round. And normally, they go away quite often, resist it, and then I get a phone call going, you all right? Is it some magical thing? No, it's not a magical thing. What I'm doing is looking at the deeper part of that person's communication from the tree. Does that make sense? Yeah? Looking at what the soul is trying to communicate to the personality, but the personality doesn't want to know. Does that make sense? And we do it on a consistent basis. You are very aware of unmanaged personalities, okay? Now what happens is, the more unmanaged a person's personality is, the more that you have, most likely in the past, or you have been doing it now, is that you decide to be of service to the more dominant force, okay, so the more dominant personality, through people-pleasing, worrying about what other people think, and feeling unworthy. Okay, does that make sense? So if someone gets stroppy with you, or goes into a place of confrontation, the majority of people in this room will go, whoa, what did I do wrong? Yeah, rather than go, actually, get lost. The default setting is, oh my God, I did something horrendous. Okay. So when that gets really strong, we then don't feel respected, so we then spend that time trying to rebel. Okay. For more great free content designed to support your purchase of my book, Highly Intuitive People, 7 right brain traits to change the lives of intuitive sensitive people, please visit finallyfeelunderstood.com. There you can subscribe and download for free the meditations specific to today's episode. If you have already read the book, then it's time for you to receive exclusive access and support from me and your fellow intuitive sensitives as we go deeper together along this proven 7-step path by joining us in my monthly membership program called Heidi's Circle. There you can ask me anything in a safe and private environment, and I will answer you live. Join us today by visiting healmyinnerworld.com.